Hi, my name is Marie Graham, and I live in Atlanta, Georgia. I'm the director of a virtual reality lab where high school students use design thinking to create products. I think what I wanted to start with when I was talking to you today is really starting with the genesis of the lab because I feel like it's really important. The way the lab started was kind of by accident. I was teaching students about refugees, and I would tell them things like 30 million children are displaced per year because of war-torn countries or starvation. And I noticed that the kids really struggled for empathy. And it wasn't because they were bad kids, it was because where they are developmentally and having an understanding. And so what I did was I ended up using the New York Times, The Displaced, to show the kids what it was like to be a refugee. And The Displaced was created by the New York Times. It was actually their very first VR experience, and it's amazing. It follows three refugee children. And what I saw was a huge jump in empathy. And it inspired me to ask the question, how might we use immersive technology to impact the world by doing good? I feel like technology can be used in a destructive way, but how do we harness that at a high school level for good and propel these kids forward? I will tell you, we're a school, the Mount Vernon School in Atlanta, Georgia. It's a school of innovation and design thinking. They are design thinking as preschool kids. And so immediately we begin to think, we have to move past the novelty of virtual reality into not just consuming, but how are we storytelling, how are we creating, and what are we putting out into the world? And that is what we did. We were lucky to be able to get a partnership with Alienware. And so this is a picture actually of some of the kids that are involved in the lab, but they actually came up from Texas and helped us create this amazing lab. The next thing that happened was I am also a nurse practitioner and nurse midwife. I've delivered 1,000 babies. And so it's interesting having a medical background and also being in education, because immediately I was like, my son is dyslexic. He goes to the school for dyslexic children. Let's take it to the school and see what we can do to help those kids. And immediately we had the kids tracing letters, and there was an immediate connection between phonics and the physicality of letters that was pretty magical. And that's the first thing we did. When we think about user-based design, we talk about we are basing everything we're doing on this specific user. We're developing for them, we're testing it out, we're going back to them and asking questions again, we're researching, we're defining, and we're going into this kind of circular design loop. And one of the things that happened really right off the bat was that several children said to me, they had been in rehabilitation before, and they thought it was really painful and uncomfortable, and they were curious if we could do something for patients. This is one of the things that we started looking at was electrical stimulation therapy, which is a pretty common actually. And what it does is that it uses electrical stimulation to help weakened muscles strengthen, muscles that are atrophying, helps build them up. And we found out that this was very common and a very uncomfortable type of therapy. So what we did was we actually initially went in to speak to the users, and this is actually a group of students who are speaking to one of the medical directors of the rehabilitation center at Children's Healthcare Atlanta. It's one of the largest children's hospitals in the Southeast. The kids even got on the bikes. They experienced electrostimulation therapy, so it's very interesting to have the firsthand feeling of the discomfort of it. It was very interesting to watch their empathy grow as they listened. Another piece of this is just the research that we did. We know that the brain is 10 billion brain cells, 100 trillion connections, and yet it's the least studied of the organs. We thought that was really interesting. And even with the paucity of research, one thing that we do know through the research that we did is that the brain does not multitask. And so with virtual reality, where you're completely immersed in a task, your brain is almost like on a dial tone because it is completely in a different place. So what's exciting about that is that because it can't multitask, when it starts getting a lot of pain signals and a patient is immersed in virtual reality, it's kind of short-circuited and they actually don't have as much discomfort. So that's kind of where we were starting. And then going on, we looked at opioid overdose deaths, which we all know is a huge problem. And what you see is you see this gradual incline in the early 2000s. And then around 2014, you see this like almost a vertical climb. And those are the synthetic opioids like tramadol and fentanyl. And what we do know with the few studies that have been done is that as patients are using virtual reality and it's decreasing pain, that we have an opportunity to decrease the use of these opioids for patients. We spoke to the pediatric patients again and again, and this is what they told us. I mean, they told us we love oceans and games and festivals and animals, and they loved color and surprises. They were scared during the procedures, and they just really wanted to be anywhere else. And then I got them on PubMed, and we're like researching qualitative and quantitative studies. And what we found were that there were certain things that were associated with a decrease in pain, particularly with the pediatric population. Those were rhythmic motions and sounds and novelty and stories, all the things that we know already in brain research with in education as well. I wanted to show you some of the messy slides because at Mount Vernon we always start with questions, and we actually in about a 30-minute period, a sprint, we came up with about 100 questions, and that is what you're seeing here. Then students sat down and they learned to code. We didn't start off with coders, so kids learned C# and we began to work primarily with Unity to make this first island. And here's some kids that are actually at the beginning stages of the coding for this process. And we ended up with something called the Carnival. The Carnival is really interesting because it takes all of those pieces from the user interviews and polls, and it takes all the research we did from PubMed, everything that we learned, we put together in this one island. And these are actual pictures from it. Everything is interactive, so you can actually walk up to the beach ball, you can throw it, you can get on the Ferris wheel and actually go around and see the view of the island. There's a quiet side of the island where you're just listening to waves and looking at crabs and fish and things like that. But then if you want more agency and you want to be able to move around more, you go to the other side of the island. This is us driving there with our final prototype. Everyone's super excited. We arrive at Children's Healthcare of Atlanta. We're carrying the Oculus, as you can see. They've worked on this for a year and a half, and then the first patient uses this. And what I want to tell you is that it was pure magic. One thing that happened was that we ended up not using it just for distraction. What we found was that actually the PTs were using it more for movement, for specific movement. So moving down, moving up, moving around, and specific exercises while the patient was in the island. It was pretty amazing to watch. One thing that happened right away is this specific patient was in a great deal of pain initially. He normally did about 10 to 15 minutes of therapy, and we saw that he did about double that, and that was with the first experience. And you can kind of see there's another patient that's using it. I want to end on this very, very short video right here and show you this.
Step with your left leg. If you want to go to the left side, let's turn your whole body.
And I just wanted to say that it was magical to be able to create something with high school students. You know, they can change the world now. They don't have to wait. It was a natural transition, us being a nurse practitioner and a nurse midwife, to kind of bridge that gap. And I did want to say that this was an amazing experience and we are currently have about 3 or 4 other projects we're working on, and we're so excited to get to share this with you today.